Bivens for the first match of the day. I love this slide here, them showing off their cards for their deck. I'm very excited to get into this first match of the top 16 of the Disney Lorcana North American Championship.
All right, Zach has had some very, very good runs at the Disney Lorcana challenges, but has had a few heartbreaks, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited for this match specifically because Zach is arguably one of the best performing Swiss players in Disney Lorcana history. He's topped multiple challenges. He was 31st in Atlanta, 17th in Chicago, 43rd in Dallas, and then 33rd in Vegas. Both in Atlanta and Chicago, he was the #1 seed going into day 2. And in every single one of those, he fell just short of an invite to the Continental Championship. He was able to get an invite here because of a pass down, because there were some people that had earned their invite already for challenges that made it into that range again for Disney Lorcana challenges, which is why he's here today. Nobody can question Zach's ability. He 1000% deserves to be here. And I am so nervous for Zach because it would be in Bivens fashion to get this close and then fall short. I know that the community is rooting for him. I know that a lot of people want to see him do well. So we get to watch it live here. We get to see if he makes it. But of course, Sean is the highest seed in 6th place, so he's going to get to go first. He's only going to ink a Tamatoa. This is a Ruby Sapphire versus Amethyst Steel matchup. Unfortunate for Sean to not find like a turn 1 popsicle. We'll see how Zach opens up this game.
Yeah, so Zach notably did send 6 back as well, so has a pretty fresh hand here. I see. Doesn't look like there's going to be a 1-drop in the hand for Zach as well, so it looks like both players probably stumbling here on the first turns of the game. Back over to our Ruby Sapphire player. Do we have that turn 2 ramp? Most likely.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way it works in Ruby Sapphire now. The math and the hypergeometric math to find your turn 2 ramp is just so likely. I think you're going to see it every single game. It's just a question of what pieces do you find around that, right? Do you have the 1-drop to start it off? Do you have the Hiram to kind of follow up on the 4th? Do you have something like your Grand Matala for more card selection? This Ruby Sapphire deck, it is tried and true. It's been around for so many sets, but there's a reason. It's just so powerful, and it's only gotten better.
Zach is having a very tough opening as well, finding the Chernobog's followers off the top, thankfully, because the only other 2-drop in hand was a Madame Snake. Wouldn't have been able to play that out without a character. So the 1-drop coming a little bit too late, but at least we get to play something out. Does see Sean is going to brawl this Chernobog's followers, getting any characters off of Zach's side of the board. Sean understands his role in this matchup, can't let Zach gain any board advantage early on.
I mean, to be fair, I actually think it's just a very clunky draw from Sean as well. I mean, Sean does have the Hiram, which is a critical piece, but doesn't have the item to draw off of it. Other than that, has Maui plus Maui Half Shark. It doesn't really do much here. Luckily, Zach is not putting on the pressure, so Sean might be able to come, sort of get out of this situation. But yeah, I mean, has to brawl the Chernobog's followers just to deny value on Zach's end. Looks like we do draw a 3-cost uninkable Sisu off the top here, and Maui Half Shark might be the ink for the turn. And Hiram's going to come down, no target.
Very unfortunate for Sean, not finding those items that he needs, but Zach is getting up to an ink where a lot of his powerful cards are being played. We do see the rabbit coming down. He's going to get to draw a card when it enters and leaves play. Interesting thing in Zach's deck list, he's playing 4 rabbits and 2 genies. We've talked about how strong Genie can be in this metagame, but Zach deciding to go the rabbit route as well. One thing I'm noticing about his deck list is a lot of his characters sort of replace themselves on board. That's kind of the style that Amethyst has been running this set. All of those cheap 1-drops like Diablo, Chernobog's followers, Magic Broom, and Merlin Rabbit here. He's playing all of those cards that will draw cards when they're banished or when they leave play. So interesting thing to note there. We do see Sean singing How Far I'll Go with the Hiram, getting to look at the top 2 cards of the deck, put one in the Inkwell.
That was an incredible top deck, by the way. That's exactly what you need. You need both. You need card advantage and you need ramp. You need more card selection as well, because Sean's hand prior to this was just kind of a brick. Luckily, Zach is giving him room to do that. I would say in the head-to-head, as we head to the mid to the late game, I think the Ruby Sapphire is significantly advantaged in that. So while Zach's deck does kind of turn on here at turn 4, I mean, Zach would like to get significantly more advantage in the early game to be able to capitalize that as we move to this mid to late game.
I definitely agree. And we've seen in some of these matchups yesterday, cards like Maui Half Shark, Sisu and Empowered Sibling as well can be detrimental to decks like Zach's. But one thing that Zach has going for him is he is running the full bounce package. He does have the Madame M Foxes and Madame M Snakes, so he can use those to kind of keep cards safe in his hand that he wants to. We are turning it back to Zach on this turn. We're going to go with another rabbit, drawing another card.
You
as it enters play.
You imagine both players heading into their top 16 match. You get like you're in the situation where you feel like you have to win to make the top 8 to progress in the tournament to get your Worlds invite, and both players have these significantly suboptimal draws.
You just both brick horrendously. I think Zach is trying to decide what he wants to ink for the turn before we pass it over. Flipping between a Lawrence and a White Rose. We do have that Diablo that we could play when we ink on this turn.
And so Zach also too, and then along came Zeus in hand as well, as in a form of removal that could deal with this hero potentially as he runs something else into it.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Zach is playing 4 Along Came Zeus, 4 Strength of Raging Fire, and then that's it in regards to removal for this deck. Not playing any of the Storm Rage on, another card that we see pretty popular in Steel removal. Are going to ink this White Rose. Are we going to play the Diablo out? We will.
Yeah, Maui Half Shark not looking too scary for Zach here in terms of, if it comes down to Sean's end, being able to threaten that recursive, sort of bring the action back out of the discard. Zach seems well prepared against it. That is really not the draw you're looking for. I mean, it will do something, but Sean is really stumbling on this draw. This is a very suboptimal Ruby Sapphire draw we've seen so far, and while Zach is also matching him in terms of not having the best cards in his deck come off the top of the deck, he's looking like he's in a much better position. 4 characters on board, 2 rabbits deployed.
Yeah, I mean, Zach definitely has the wider board. 3 out of the 4 characters on Zach's board will replace themselves as they are banished or leave play. We do see the Maui come down, challenging and banishing the rabbit. Zach will get a draw off of that, but these 2 Sisu Daring Visitors in Sean's hand are going to be a little bit of a brick. You can't ink any of those because they're uninkable. The only target that we have for that on Zach's side of the board is this Diablo Obedient Obedient Raven, I believe. So just not optimal for Sean here. And of course, I think Zach had another Along Came Zeus in hand. I believe I saw a Genie in hand as well. One thing that Amethyst does really well is, when you have some of these unoptimal hands, you're usually able to draw out of them. The majority of the cards in Zach's deck either draw him cards or gain him lore. So he's going to be able to sort of cycle his way through this. We'll go back to Zach. He's going to draw for turn. See a Calhoun in hand.
This is just an absolute disaster for Sean. So Sean, even if he plays the uninkable Sisu and then draws something like the 8-cost Sisu to potentially shift onto it, I mean, I guess that is one of the better ways out of this situation to sort of take control of board. A really tight spot with those 3 uninkable. I mean, worst case scenario would probably be another uninkable off the top. Sean's got to find a way to sort of string together a draw engine. Does have the Popsicle deployed on board, so could find a hero off the top, maybe find his way back into the game that way. Not looking good for a Ruby Sapphire player so far. Zach not pressing the advantage too much. Bit of room.
Yeah, Zach having quite a few options here. He only has 2 inkable cards in hand, a Madam M. Fox and a Lawrence, so could choose to ink one of those this turn, but might potentially want to use the Madam M. Fox to bounce this rabbit, draw a couple extra cards.
So Sean also, I believe, only has 6 ink available, so even if the Genie is deployed here, starts questing, the B-Prep comes off the top, it's just not going to be available.
It's like we are going to start by questing the rabbit. Are we going to see the Madam M. Fox come down? Exerting 3, and there it is. Madam M. Fox coming in out of the bushes, chasing the rabbit away. Zach is going to draw a card off the top when the rabbit leaves play. Madam M. Fox does have Rush, so he can choose to challenge this Maui and banish it with Madam M. Fox if Zach wants to. Doesn't have to, of course. Zach still has a little bit of ink to play with. Could play out this Calhoun.
And Sean probably forced to ink whatever comes off the top. I assume it's not a hero. I mean, maybe he could find something like Grammatala from a card selection. I mean, that's really what he needs. Card selection, card draw. But sitting at 6 inks is going to be a tough spot here.
Zach deciding to quest with the Diablo and the Pete. We are going to see the Calhoun come and play a new card. Very great steel card from the new set, Azurite Sea. Calhoun has resist +1, and when she challenges and banishes a character, she gains 2 lore. So great way to kind of keep tempo and continue pressing your advantage.
Vision of the Future going to offer Sean some card selection here. Best draw here would definitely have been a Hiram. Does look like he finds a Grimmatal. I'm not sure if that's going to be the selection. Finds a Popsicle as well. That's what's left-hand side there.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing here, like you mentioned, we had no inkables in hand, found the Vision of the Future, deciding not to ink that, instead searching for cards. We can play something like the Grimmatala if we pull it off the top. I think we're still looking for an inkable card, though. Ruby Sapphire has to build up its inkwell in order to really get into its groove.
Finding an inkable off the Grammatala is quite likely in this scenario.
It would let Sean develop something on the board to combat a little bit of Zach's board.
I guess also, so off the Grammatal, you could find something like Hiram, which you wouldn't ink in that scenario.
Looks like we going to play the Sisu on this Diablo, banishing it. When it enters play, Diablo's going to draw a card when it's banished. Sets up for a potential shift Sisu if we find it off the top. Only needs 6 ink to shift Sisu and Emboldened Warrior on top of this Daring Visitor. Of course, it wouldn't do much in this game state as both characters in play for Zach have more than 2 strength. Zach has a full hand of cards. This is what Amethyst Steel does best. You continue to put pressure onto the board, and as things get banished, cards just enter your hand. Looking at a couple inkable cards in hand as well.
What's really good for Zach here is also insulated against the Maui Half Shark with that along came Zeus just sitting in hand. I'm sure that's what Zach's sort of preparing against here.
I have to think adding 4 of those into your deck, it was something that Zach intentionally did, thinking of the Maui Half Shark and the Ruby Sapphire matchup, because it just perfectly answers that card, dealing 5 damage to any character. Relatively easy to sing as well with the characters that you're playing. Lots of very strong 4-drop cards in Amethyst like Genie, Rabbit, Goat.
So we did end up grabbing that Grammatala as well off of that Visions of the Future.
Looks like we're going to start with a Rabbit for Zach. Drawing a card off the top. Seeing if we can find anything that might change our line of play.
I think that Zach just needs to find the more aggressively oriented cards in his deck right now and just start questing. Like, you got to smell that Sean's in a bad scenario. 2 cards in hand, not that much ink, and just nothing going on board. It's time for Zach to sort of press the advantage and pull ahead here.
Going to see Zach play another Diablo Obedient Raven. Just going to quest out with the Calhoun and the Pete, knowing that both of them are safe to quest. With only the Tipo and the Sisu Daring Visitor in play, they each only have 1 strength, so can't challenge and banish any of the characters exerted now. Pushing that advantage, getting a little bit closer to 20.
Going to be that 8-cost uninkable Sisu off the top here for Sean. Another uninkable.
Not a terrible card in this scenario. It would banish the Rabbit and the Diablo that was played last turn, though both of those cards would just replace themselves in Zach's hand.
Now, so you're worried about Zach questing for sure right now, getting too much advantage, but it is going to be the shift there.
Going to see both of those banished. 2 cards drawn for Zach.
With that 5/4 stat line as well, you can kind of take over the board.
Yeah, helps you clear up most of the board in this scenario. Getting rid of that Calhoun. Don't want to let Zach challenge with that. Gaining 2 lore off of it. A pass back here. Zach finds that 3rd along came Zeus off the top. Haven't seen any of our strengths yet, I don't think, either.
The guy decides to deal with this Sisu. Likely will not let it make it to the next turn.
With so many cards in hand, as we get further and further into this game, Zach can relatively safely continue to ink cards, and you can start comboing some of your 4-cost and 3-cost cards like Goat and Madam M. Fox pretty easily.
I do think that Sean still has a possibility to draw himself out of this game. Does have the Grammatala for the additional card selection, but really needs some good stuff to start coming off the top here.
Yeah, we've seen over and over through this weekend how good Amethyst Steel is at continuing to apply pressure. Even in these Ruby Sapphire matchups, the most controlling deck in the game, they continue to wipe your board turn after turn after turn, but because you can continue to replace those cards on board with cards in hand, usually every single turn you're able to follow up with another strong board or another couple characters, kind of requiring the Ruby Sapphire players to respond over and over and over again. And if Sean can't find a way to stabilize the hand, finding some draw, that's going to be difficult for him. We do see the Madam M. Fox being played, bouncing the Pete back to hand. Can use this Pete to stop a potential Be Prepared, keep Sean off of something like a How Far I'll Go or Visions of the Future as well, if Zach can sniff that out. Again, these matches are untimed, so these players are making for absolute certainty that they're making the most optimal plays to make it to this next round. Maybe the most important match of the day for some of these players, earning the invite to Worlds if they make it through on this one.
Zach has a lot of decisions right now with that many cards in hand.
Are going to see the Goat enter the Inkwell,
which is probably highly debated. Like, that's probably a lot of what Zach was thinking is, like, do I need to start pressing the advantage more now? Do I need to press my lore advantage? Do I keep this Goat for later? You know, has to answer the Sisu, though. Definitely cannot let that stay. Back over to Sean here. Do we find we need... We're going to start off the Grammatala here. We are, so that's what's in hand. Going to look at the top two. Pick one of them. Pretty quick pick there. Maybe we find something good. Could be ink as well. 3 ink available here for Sean.
Interested to see what Sean does with his 3 remaining ink. Haven't inked for the turn yet.
Looking in the yard, wonder if he picked up a Maui Half Shark. Just as a little tell there.
Seeing what maybe he could pull back if he can get it into play. That would be pretty difficult for Sean, though, if you play out this Maui Shark. We know Zach has 2 Long Came Zeus in hand, even a rabbit to sing it on this next turn.
That's
visions of the future.
Look at the top 5 again. Are we going to find that Hiram? We can find our way back into this game in terms of card advantage to match Zach on the other side of the table.
Sean taking some time, thinking pretty hard about what he wants to take out of these 5. In a very tight position. Can't make a lot of mistakes.
It's going to be a ice block.
It's pretty helpful. It's going to allow him to use some of those Sisu Daring Visitors in hand.
Yep, we know he's got 1 more of the 3 cost uninkable Sisus in hand. The ice block, definitely not the worst draw, but has to be hoping for that draw engine to come over soon and turn the rest to Hiram.
Yeah, I imagine that's what he's trying to dig for when playing those Visions of the Futures, Grammatalas, etc.
I mean, Hiram probably one of the few very threatening cards that Zach doesn't really have a super clean answer to in Sean's deck. So Hiram likely getting 2 full sequences of value, both on enter and on that quest before it gets cleared by Zach. Assuming that Zach is even winning on board at that point and can clear the Hiram. I'm assuming that in combination with something like And Then Along Came Zeus, which I would assume that's actually a suboptimal use of that card, right? Because you effectively kind of have to 2-for-1 yourself. Or against Maui Half Shark, it's just a nice 1-for-1, which is a very threatening card in the Ruby Sapphire list.
Going to see Zach start with another Merlin Rabbit. Seen these things bounce back and forth. Feels like 20 times already on this game. Drawing card after card after card for Zach. Going to drop a Lawrence as well. A 4-4 with 2 lore. Loses all of that strength when it's damaged, though. Pretty decent card against the Ruby Sapphire matchup because they don't particularly have a great way to ping damage onto this Lawrence card because of that 4 strength.
Yeah, actually, honestly, a very tough card for Ruby Sapphire to deal with.
Also gives Zach the ability to challenge back, with 4 strength. The numbers in Lorcana can make all the difference. 3 to 4 seems to be a pretty big break point on some of these cards. Something like a Sisu Emboldened Warrior being a 5-4, Lawrence is a pretty good card to challenge back and banish that in one go, not having to use some of your removal like Strength of Raging Fire or Long Came Zeus.
Has Sean found a way to draw more cards? 7 ink available. Zach's got to be feeling good here. Has taken the more... Or sail into the Azurite Seer here for Sean. But Zach has taken the more attrition-based route, has pressed the card advantage, has opted not to play the Genie, instead play the Merlin Rabbits here, and keep drawing cards so he can extend into the mid to late game. And there we go. We see with the Sisu that we knew about in hand. We're going to run into the Merlin Rabbit here as well.
Go ahead and quest with this Tipo. Pushing our lore lead just as little, as much as we can. But clearing up Zach's board pretty effectively. Getting those rabbits off of board can be pretty good as well. Keep Zach from being able to bounce them back to hand with cards like Madam M Snake or Madam M Fox to continue to draw cards, as we've seen Zach do all game long.
It's just going to be a pass back. I have to assume that's just not super ideal for Sean. So, yes, the board might look manageable, but look at how many cards Zach has in hand. Also, he's been sitting on these cards for multiple turns. You know that Zach has the gas and he's ready to answer most of the things that come down. So you can't, at this point, if it's open deck list and you've seen those in the Long Game Zeus, Zach's holding those.
You have to assume that he's holding some kind of removal in hand.
Part of your win condition is just ineffective almost at this point. I mean, you're still going to play it to force out that card, but tough spot here for Sean. Did you see our first Genie of the game?
That what comes next ability. Zach draws a card when Genie enters play. An evasive character, 2 lore. Card that really has to be answered. It replaces himself when he's played, but also just an aggressive quester. Difficult to deal with because of that evasive keyword.
Zach kept that card back for so long. And Sean activates the ice block and plays the second Sisu in hand on the rabbit, and then immediately the Genie comes. And Genie is just like a ridiculous threat here because, I mean, Zach's already at 10 lore. Sean has to answer this Genie now. And, like, does he have to B-prep his own board for just a +1 character advantage?
But he can't even B-prep
because the P comes down as the final turn. So Zach also smells that that's his way back into this game.
Do see a Brawl and a Pirate's Life. Another card playing around, getting rid of this Genie here. You know, can't play the Brawl. I was going to say it's an interesting conversation of how many Genies do you play, how many Rabbits do you play in these Amethyst decks, and I think part of that discussion comes down to whether or not, or what the outs are to cards like Genie and Rabbit. And if you're playing in a Ruby, you know there's Brawl, you know there's Sisu and Bolden Warrior, as we see being played here. So Zach playing to those outs, playing the Pete, saying if you have the Brawl in hand, if you have the Be Prepared, you can't play any of those to get rid of the Genie. You need the Dragon. You need him, the Empowered Sibling.
That was pretty much only Sean's only out to just an absolute disaster scenario. If we had passed back over to Zach's turn and Zach had been able to quest with those characters, I think this game would have been well and truly over. So a big pickup from Sean in terms of the Sisu there.
Zach using And Along Came Zeus to banish that Sisu Empowered Sibling. Zach has so much ink in his inkwell too. Interesting thing in a matchup like this, does he have more ink than the Ruby Sapphire player?
He does.
Very interesting way that this match has unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big win for Sean, and that was a huge trade with that Sisu coming down. I still think that Zach is significantly ahead in this game.
And doing what Amethyst Steel does best, just refilling the board immediately after with Smee and Calhoun. Smee, a great aggressive quester, 3/3 body on a 2-cost character. And again, we've talked about the strength of Calhoun being able to challenge banished characters and gaining 2 lore off of that challenge.
Lucky Dime's got to be the worst draw possible here.
That Brawl in hand isn't going to be effective on anything on board. We do have a Pirate's Life in hand, which could end up being important. It would take away 2 lore from Zach.
We have
2
the
lore
ice
for Sean.
Is the ice block
yes,
available?
We do have the ice block.
It's still not great, to be honest.
No, not a great trade. Smee is not the card I think you want to be using ice block on. And Brawl.
Absolute survival mode here for Sean, and I think that Zach's going to realize that now. Honestly, the things I'm most worried about is those 1-drops they start coming off, because you're basically going to force, like, I need to answer these 1-drops, or they're just going to get the quest value that's in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's going to be too much.
Yeah, forcing Sean to make those bad trades, too, as well, right? You don't want to be using your prime removal on those cheap 1-cost characters, but you, of course, can't let them survive when Zach's already up to 12 lore. Typically in Amethyst decks, and you don't want them to get too close to 20 because of cards like Merlin Goat. Zach is also playing 2 copies of the White Rose, so multiple ways to gain lore instantaneously if he can get close enough to 20 to do so.
I do think that B-Prep was probably what Sean was hoping for here, but does not find it.
Yeah, this isn't looking too great. Lucky Dime, Pirate's Life, and Maui Half Shark. We can try to get this Pirate's Life in the discard if Maui Shark can stick.
Yeah, we know that Maui Shark will not stick, and I mean, this is just going to be too much lore as Zach heads up to 16. I know it's effectively 14 with that Pirate's Life, but then those goats, they're going to come off the top as we replace these 1-drop characters, and Zach's going to be able to close out this game.
Double Along Came Zeus in hand is going to be brutal for Sean here. We're going to draw a card off the Turnbox followers after we quest with it, banish itself. Going to go ahead and quest with everything, going up to
16 here.
16. I'm sure we'll see this Zeus coming down. Diablo's going to get played. In fact, maybe considering bouncing a card back to hand and replaying a Calhoun or something to keep it readied.
Maybe realizes he doesn't need that for something like a goat. Needs to protect against like a Maui with Rush. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that Maui Half Shark, and now it's also your court. Can
grief.
is it B prep off the top or not? It's actually going to be that Maui with Rush, but that's not going to be enough. You have to. So even with a Pirate's Life, Zach's closing in here, so down to 14.
Yeah, we can delay it 1 turn, reducing 2 lore for Zach. He has 5 lore on board, so he could go up to 19, but a White Rose off the top, a goat off the top would have Zach winning this first game. Let's see if he can find it. Is that the goat?
Yep, that's the goat.
Zach finds the goat, and he takes game 1 of this best of 3.
Convincing win here for Zach Bivens in game 1. Notably, Sean was on the play as well, so important to note as the Ruby Sapphire player. So he's going to go into game 2, he's going to be on the play again, but in game 3, I mean, if we do end up going, there's Zach troll deck, but if it stumbles in that early to mid game, we've seen this time and time again. We've seen this set in Lorcana, is that whether it's Ruby Amethyst or it's Amethyst Steel, that deck with the Amethyst draw package can out attrition a Ruby Sapphire deck that stumbles.
Yeah, we've seen it a couple times this weekend. Also, just have to highlight again the weight of this match. You know, Sean is down 1 game, and this is a match that is getting these players an invite to the Disney Lorcana World Championship.
Yeah, I talked about the pressure, and I talked about taking it game by game, but if you're ever going to feel the pressure, it's right now if you're on Sean's end, because Sean knows that the World's invite is just one step away, and he knows that he is in the hot seat right now, being 0-1 against Zach, especially after being on the play. And Zach, notably, had a pretty bad draw as well. So if that had been a game where like the Ruby Sapphire player had a bad draw, and then our Amethyst Steel player had a normal or good draw, okay, that's the game. But both players having a bad draw and you losing your advantage on the play, you're in a tough spot.
We are going to start with Sean going first. We're going to ink a Visions of the Future and playing a Popsicle on turn 1, drawing a card. Already a better start for Sean than last game.
Better draw for Zach as well with this turn 1 Magic Broom. We have that turn 2 acceleration. We do, I assume at this point with, being able to scope your hand almost 14 cards, it's nigh guaranteed to find that.
Have to highlight something as well. Something like Magic Broom here is a very specific pick. We don't have any other 1 cost in hand, but every other 1 cost in Zach's deck only has 1 willpower. Knowing that Tipo is the card that Sean is likely looking for as this turn 2 ramp so that we can challenge into these characters, that difference of the 1 willpower versus 2 willpower of the Magic Broom can make all the difference. It allows Zach to quest with the Magic Broom here and not have to banish it as he plays this Mr. Smee, knowing that the Tipo is not going to be able to challenge back and remove that character. Zach can potentially get 1 entire extra quest out of it, but we do see the Hiram coming in on the turn 3 with the Popsicle, able to banish it, finding that draw engine that Sean was missing last game.
I swear, the dichotomy of these 2 games, we saw the most atypical game. It was atypical match in game 1, and now we're seeing both decks doing what they're trying to do and curve out.
So we pass it back to Zach. He's going to immediately quest with the Magic Broom and Mr. Smee, going up to 4 lore on his turn 3. Snake is going to enter the Inkwell. Are we going to see Lawrence here? We sure are. 4-4 with 2 lore. Zach just putting on the pressure here with these high lore characters. Also going to draw a card off of that Magic Broom when Lawrence enters play. Banishing the Magic Broom as we go back to Sean.
Roll off the top. Not what you're looking to see. You do have the combination with the Ice Block, but that's not really what you're trying to do against this Mr. Smee, which is already exerted. I don't believe we have a Rush Maui in hand.
I don't think we do. I do see the Brawl and the Ice Block in there. Notice
Maui Half Shark, actually. That's sort of the middle card there.
Maui Half Shark and a Sisu empowered sibling there in the very back. I note all this because I noticed that Zach has 2 Genies and 2 Rabbits in hand as well. So some of the more powerful 4-drop cards that Zach is getting ready to play on the next turn. Sean can set up some of these removal options with cards like Ice Block, deciding to use the Ice Block to draw cards with Hiram there, drawing a Sisu and a How Far I'll Go.
How Far I'll Go should be pretty nice on that following turn as well. Go ahead and ink that Tamatoa. We're going to go ahead and brawl that Smee. Unfortunately, can't use that 3-cost Sisu because the Smee's still sitting at 2 strength. Back over to Zach here, just the Lawrence on board. Ruby Sapphire deck going much better than the previous game. We're starting to see the power showcase by this deck and what it tries to do.
Zach is going to start by inking his Pete. We're going to see that Rabbit interplay. Zach's going to draw a card when it enters play. He'll also draw a card when Rabbit leaves play. Great card in positions like this, playing against Ruby, where you can commit this card to board, and if Sean has the removal for it, you at least get a card draw off instead of a card like Genie.
Ooh, finds a Popsicle off the top. That was such a good draw.
One of the best.
Such a good draw.
One of the better draws for Sean here, able to play the Popsicle, immediately banish it when he quests with Hiram, drawing 3 total extra cards this turn.
That is a huge difference maker because as we played the Rabbit on Zach's side, it was like, is Sean going to kind of run out of steam? Is he going to have to make meaningful decisions when he inks cards? Going to have to maybe ink something he doesn't want to? Not anymore. That was a huge pickup by Sean. Vision of the Future going to be the play here. Going to look at the top 5.
And the difference between these 2 games, Sean last game being starved for resources, and now it feels like he has his pickings. Looking at the top 5. Can't see what he has, but taking some time to think about what he wants to pick up. Interesting to watch these players try to read each other as well. You can see Zach looking at Sean, trying to see if he can figure anything out based on facial expressions. It's such a high stakes game. You want to get any amount of information as you can.
Yeah, notably no, and then along came Zeus in the hand for Zach, so maybe could be a bit of a tough scenario. And there we go. We see the 3-cost unequal Sisu go ahead and take out that Lawrence, but I wonder if he could be at a little bit of risk of like a Maui half shark coming down.
That could definitely be a concern. Got 2 genies, a goat, rabbit. I think a Pete as well in hand. Going to start with another rabbit.
Looks like we're going to be pushing to the mid to late game here as both players sort of start to gather up their resources and play out their draw engines.
And one thing that Zach is missing is, like you mentioned, is those long came Zeus of the storm, or Strength of Raging Fires. Knowing that we're getting into a portion of the game where Sean's going to start dropping those large characters like Maui Half Shark and Sisu.
Yeah, the Maui Half Shark is just an absolute must answer because it recurs that card out of the discard. I mean, there is the additional utility of it giving you a lore as well. But if you're singing How Far I'll Go right now with Hiram, and then you play a Maui Half Shark, you can't just be letting your opponent play like How Far I'll Go multiple times. Like, they cannot get 2x value out of that card. It's just way too much.
And even cards that are already super powerful, like Visions of the Future, letting you look at the top 5 cards, it's also now gaining you a lore.
I mean, you're talking about like draw 2 cards. It's just absolutely crazy. Plus the card selection of looking at the top 5.
Are going to see that Sisu being shifted here, banishing both rabbits in play. Zach will draw 2 cards off of those rabbits. Now we have Shark going into the Inkwell, it looks like. As we pass back to Zach, it's going to draw for turn. Finds a Diablo.
We're closing in on Tamatoa range as well, which is a card that I'm assuming Zach cannot deal with very well.
No.
Not at all. And I'm assuming Zach's deck actually tries to kind of end the game, or at least get close to ending the game, get into that range where you can kind of goat bounce out your opponent or play the White Rose before we get to Tamatoa area. Don't think that's going to happen this game.
Speaking of White Rose.
Yeah, White Rose comes down for Zach. Plenty of items in the discard here for Sean. There's that Tamatoa and that Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, and very nice top end curve here on the left side of Sean's hand.
Yeah, plenty of answers for pretty much anything Zach does now. Using the Maleficent, we could use the Maleficent Dragon to banish a difficult to get rid of character. We could use the Sisu to wipe majority of Zach's board based on the characters they're typically played. We are going to see the dragon come down, banishing the Lawrence. 2 very big dragons on Sean's side of the board now, between Monstrous Dragon and Empowered Sibling.
Now Sean is ahead on lore and is firmly in control of the board as well.
Fortunately, Zach just does not have the cards he really needs to combat this board state for Sean.
No, and also with the Tamatoa in hand, it feels like Sean's going to assemble a board state that Zach just simply can't deal with if we're not already at that state.
Yeah, this is a position where Sean can start to... still obviously needs to remove a lot of the characters from Zach's side of the board, keep board control, but on top of doing that, he's going to be able to create a ton of advantage in hand with cards like Hiram, and then probably quest out with cards like Sisu and Maleficent Dragon, pushing that lore lead even further.
And Zach's just really not in a position to try to end this game quickly, only sitting at that 8 lore.
Does find it along came Zeus off of this Genie being played. Genie wish fulfilled.
Yeah, unfortunately not going to be able to play it this turn, though. So we'll have a way to deal with that Sisu. Of course, could Madam M Fox bounce if he does find that card. Tough spot here for Zach.
Does have a Fox in hand that we could play this turn if we wanted after we ink a card. We go ahead and ink a White Rose here. Questing with the other. Interesting decision as well. I see a lot of players inking some of they're like cheaper cards. Like there's a Diablo that's in hand, but Zach understands that he's going to stay in this game. He's going to need gas. So he does want to end the game early, and White Rose helps him get closer to that win condition. But having cards like Diablo that you can play sort of non-committally, knowing that if it gets banished, then it replaces itself and somewhat keeps you in the game, helps you dig, Heads up play by Zach there.
Tamatoa has hit the field here.
Of course, Tamatoa allows you to take a item card from the discard when he's played and when he quests. See that popsicle brought back, played, and then Hiram's going to pop the popsicle, allowing him to draw cards, find a Vitalisphere, and for every item that's in play, Tamatoa is going to gain an extra lore. So this is where Sean starts to close out the game.
A combo a lot of Lorcana players are probably familiar with at this time.
The biggest source of removal for Zach as well, being Along Came Zeus, but only dealing 5 damage to a character. Of course, is not going to crack the shell of Tamatoa there with 8 willpower.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of your clear paths to victory here, as Sean is like, keep control of the board, ramp to Tamatoa, combo that with Hiram and some items, and I mean, the opposing Amethyst Steel player just cannot deal with it.
Zach's going to do what he can to remove some characters from Sean's board, singing Along Came Zeus, getting rid of that Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, and playing out cards like Pete and Diablo so that Sean can't play any of these actions on this next turn.
An ice block off the top as well, I believe, with that Sisu in hand. Going to bring back another ice block here, potentially, for that Sisu. That's what it's going to be. So it's actually going to be another ice block, not the popsicle. Going to play that. Now he's got the 8-cost Sisu in hand.
Yeah, I think Zach knows exactly what's coming when he sees that. Sisu, Empowered Sibling, comes down, wiping Zach's entire board here. That is so bad for Zach in this position. Sean all the way up to 17. Having a difficult time thinking of something that can get Zach out of this.
There is, unfortunately, at this point, absolutely nothing. We see Zach scoop him up.
Sean is going to take game 2. We have a game 3 here for a match that's going to qualify these players for Worlds.
Zach is going to be on the play. It's the first time in this series. I would say the Ruby Sapphire. All right, so the altering hand phase is going to be very important here. I want to see how many cards Zach ends up keeping. Does he have that aggressive start he's been looking for? You know, last game was a lot better, but probably still not as explosive as we could be as the Amethyst Steel player here. We do have double Pete in hand with that Along Came Zeus. The 2-1 drop looks like the 2-1 drops are going to be the keep here. So maybe looking for that 3-1 drop play that you mentioned.
Yeah, interested to see what Zach sends back. No 2-drop character in that hand either. Could be another reason we're keeping that second 1-drop, just in case we don't find it.
5 back. Do we find the third 1-drop to go 1-drop, 1-drop, 1-drop? We do. I do see another Turner Box followers at the top, as well as the Smee. If he actually finds the fourth 1-drop, kind of a pretty nice turn 3 as well.
Yeah, could go super wide on turn 3 with Smee and the fourth 1-drop there.
That's what you want to do. I mean, that would be best case scenario here for Zach.
Yeah, and again, the majority of those cards replacing themselves as well, because you think about such an aggressive opening like that, putting multiple cards in play, 6 cards in play by turn 3. That's your entire hand. You have very few cards in hand after that, after you've inked as well. So really one of the things that Amethyst Steel can get away with doing, because even by going so wide, you're likely able to build your hand back up in case Sean's able to respond.
Yeah, I mean, so far, haven't seen the entire hand, but looks like a nice opening draw here for Zach. Probably executing the game plan that Amethyst Steel wants to do against Ruby Sapphire. We go into a game 3 here for our top 16 Worlds invite on the line. And I do see a pretty good draw from Sean as well. We see that turn 1 popsicle, turn 2 acceleration, as well as a Hiram off the back of that. So Zach is going to need the pressure if he's going to be able to combat what Sean has on the other end. Looks like we have another game where both players are going to be drawing quite well. I do see the 4 1-drops, by the way, in Zach's hand, so we do have access.
I think he's counting it out now too. He has the Calhoun as well exactly on the turn 2.
Counting with his ink.
Cost character, excuse me.
I think he has 5 1-drops in hand actually.
Sean's hand is looking pretty good too, like you said though. Having the 2-cost ramp, the popsicle Hiram, but also having the Brawl, the Maui Rush character as well. So if Zach is able to go pretty wide, Sean should have ways to counter it.
So Zach had 5 1-drops in the opening hand. I mean, Sean's going to have a good draw here as well, but the Ruby Sapphire deck is going to be inherently weak to this kind of start.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little you're going to be able to do as Ruby Sapphire when your opponent puts 6 characters in play on turn 3 or by turn 3. Zach's starting, of course, with the Diablo Obedient Raven. We'll see if we find that triple 1-drop opening. See the 2 Turnerbox followers at the front.
Yeah, uninkable off the top was actually not what Zach wanted to see there, I don't think. So now it's potentially forced to ink the Lawrence and play the double 1-drop, and then would have to find the inkable off the top to continue that line we talked about, at least curve it out the way, in the most ideal way. I think you got to go for broke here, though, because, I mean, this is a start that I don't think that Ruby Sapphire can deal with. Also, without the Tipo being the turn 2 acceleration, if it's sailing the Azurite Sea, can't contest any of these 1-drops. So it's actually... So Sean, while he has the acceleration, is in a good scenario. It's kind of a disaster if Zach goes 1-drop, 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 and then 2-drop, 1-drop on turn 3. I think you could already do the math if you played this matchup a bunch, but I would assume that's one of the openings that Ruby Sapphire simply just cannot beat if it doesn't even have a Tipo to contest these Diablos.
One thing to note as well for Zach is he has only 2 1-drops in hand, so if we play both of them out on this turn, going into turn 3, we only have 2 and 3-drop characters, so we wouldn't be able to do a play like a 2-drop and a 1-drop character. Zach deciding to just play the Mr. Smee on his turn 2, questing with the Diablo, of course, starting that lore advantage. We do see the Sail of the Azurite Sea being played. Sean will draw a card. He can ink an extra card this turn. We see Maui Half-Shark and Tamatoa entering the Inkwell, and an ice block being played. One of the benefits of Sail the Azurite Sea is that you can use that extra ink on this turn, unlike Tipo, which the ink enters play exerted. But Zach, with no characters on Sean's side of the board, is going to quest with both Mr. Smee and Diablo here. We do have a 2-cost character and a 1-cost character we could play out this turn if we wanted, or we could play out the Lawrence, which looks like is the line that Zach decides to go with. As he passes it over, Smee's going to take a damage because there's no captain in play. Sean does have both the Grandma Tala and the Hiram. Might have to play the Tala here just to get something on board to challenge these characters. That's what we see after inking the Visions of the Future. Looking at the top 2 cards of the deck. Going to take the Sail of the Azurite Sea, the other card to the bottom, and then pass the turn.
Kind of a classic from the Ruby Sapphire player. It's like when Ruby Sapphire is put under pressure, whether it's by a Flynn or it's by 1-drops, turn 4 on that, or sorry, turn 3 after you've ramped, has to deploy the Grandma Tala to actually contest the board rather than playing the Huron, which is maybe more ideal to accelerate that draw engine.
To pass it over to Zach, he does have an Long Game Zeus in hand. You know, one thing to note of last game, how important it was for him to find some of those removal cards.
You think he's just going to ink in the Long Game Zeus' Grandma Tala? I mean, probably...
Well, maybe not that. I'm thinking more saving it for a potential Sisu that comes down. I would imagine a Lawrence and a Diablo might be coming down, or maybe a Calhoun and a Diablo as well, just going wide. Zach probably trying to weigh the risks of what could be coming in the following turns.
Do you think there's a possibility Zach just doesn't ink this turn?
Could be. I mean, I feel like 4 ink is the place you really want to be in Zach's position, but going so aggressive, I wouldn't be surprised. We do see the Calhoun and the Diablo played, and it looks like that's what happens. Zach just doesn't ink on this turn and passes it back.
Yeah, doesn't want to be caught just holding like removal in hand. Must have the characters. I think Zach is in a really good position to try to close out this game. Like, what does Sean have to answer that's actually efficient? He has the Maui, so we're going to contest the board.
Yeah.
But is contesting the board via challenging, is that going to be fast enough here to stop the pressure from Zach?
Yeah, something interesting here as well is with this Calhoun play, you know, Sean is kind of forced, if he wants to challenge something with this Grandma Tala, to challenge it into like to trade into a Lawrence, or they wouldn't banish Lawrence to like the Smee or something, because you don't want to give Zach the opportunity to challenge back with this Calhoun, gaining an extra lore when he already has such a lead. 9 lore to 0 right now for Zach. 7 lore on board as well.
Yeah, Sean's had a pretty good draw, but I think that this is just kind of one of those Ruby Sapphire situations where your deck is simply not equipped to beat a board state like this. The Tipo on turn 2 probably could have been a little bit better. We're going to have to actually accelerate. So maybe realizes his only out is going to be that Sisu.
Yeah, it could be. Have to ramp up to the Sisu, though. We're pretty low on ink at this point. Are going to see the Maui enter the Inkwell.
So he's got to play the Brawl.
Has to play the Brawl. We can also...
All right, it's going to be Brawl. It's going to be on that Calhoun, which is going to allow him to not trade with this Grammatolus and then probably go into this Diablo. the Grammatala to trade with 2 things potentially ultimately on the board. See a Maui back up in hand, a Pirate's Life. That's going to be critical as Zach gets up to these higher amounts of lore. Pirate's Life representing -2 lore for Zach. And Pirate's Life on the ink, so never mind that. Maui, Hiram Flaversham, Sisu.
Yeah, I think Sean understands that he needs to use this extra ink on the turn, gets that Sisu, and
if you're exerting that much ink to play a -2 lore, and you're probably losing.
Yeah,
situation.
Is going to decide to trade the Grammatala with the Mr. Smee.
2 lore is just too much here. Finds another Lawrence off the top.
Is an inkable card. We're going to go ahead and quest out, gaining 4 lore, going up to 13 for Zach. 13 lore lead.
It is an inkable card, but does Zach ink it?
I don't know. I know he has 2 Lawrences in hand and a Zeus, right?
Yep.
Knowing that a Sisu might be coming down.
I think Zach is thinking about that right now.
Yeah. Does he ink the card? Does he just play out a Lawrence and hold it?
Your World's Invite is on the line. This is probably the hardest decision that Zach has had to make throughout this game.
Another thing to note as well is, if both of these Diablos are banished through something like a Sisu or Be Prepared off the top for Sean, because Sean only is at 6 ink right now, would only have enough for 7 on the next turn, so Be Prepared would have to be the out on Sean's next turn. The Diablos would draw him some extra cards, so maybe weighing if he wants to ink the Lawrence now or if he wants to wait and see what he finds off the top.
So that situation would make me want to ink the Lawrence. Some of the others would make me want to not, which is where if Be Prepared does not come off the top, just having that additional character in hand, I feel like could be a lot better in this situation.
I say off the top. I guess Zach doesn't actually know that Sean doesn't have...
Doesn't actually play out the Lawrence. He's insulating against the board wipe.
Yeah.
Knows his board is threatening enough, so just keeps the Lawrence back. I mean, that's like... That was a line that neither of us discussed.
No.
So that's a huge choice here by Zach.
I guess weighing that he's so far ahead in lore, understands that if the board wipe comes down, insulating against that, knowing that we can follow it up with more characters.
Yeah, ultimately, if we get to a high enough lore total, we can extend the game out into sort of like mid to late game and just win with goats.
Mm-hmm. Do you see Sean play out this Maui, trading into the or challenging into the Lawrence here, passing it back to Zach? Those Diablos are gonna
be a genie off the top here for Zach as well.
Not too bad of a card to play out.
Yeah, just an absolute must answer for Sean as it comes down. We're probably going to see that Lawrence inked and the genie come down. Oh, it's actually just going to be the Lawrence.
The Lawrence played.
Yeah, I mean, understands that B prep is just what he's trying to avoid. He's going to keep pressure on and force Sean to play out the removal that he has onto this somewhat less scary board than something like a genie. Also, genie in the Ruby Sapphire as a Ruby Sapphire opponent has a lot more answers than something like a Lawrence, which Ruby Sapphire just cannot deal with.
No, that's what I was going to say. The Lawrence over the genie ensures that last turn Big Sisu wasn't really a consideration, but this turn could be.
We're all in how far I'll go off the how far I'll go here.
Lawrence, of course, wouldn't be banished to the Sisu, whereas genie would be.
See this Sisu come down.
Interesting thing to note here, Sean has had that higher in hand since turn 1.
Just doesn't have tempo, right? I mean, you can draw as many cards as you want, but if you're behind on tempo, the opponent's just going to win the game.
Do you see the higher ring, the Inkwell? Sisu's going to come into play, banishing the Diablos. Zach draws 2 cards from it. Zach
knows that he wins the game off. It's that is an absolute desperation play. Zach's been holding back resources that could have been hit by that Sisu. The game, Zach knows that he is getting a ticket to the World Championship with that play.
I mean, look at how many cards Zach has in hand right now after that board wipe with a 15 lore lead.
I think I see a White Rose too, potentially. Oh, maybe I don't. Especially a Pete, which is pretty good in these upcoming turns, potentially.
Yeah, it could be a good way for Zach to play out a couple characters along with the Pete. Of course, he hasn't been inking for the past couple turns either, so he can probably only play 1 or 2 characters a turn at this point.
Probably going to be enough.
He is finding some of those cards, though, that he can do that with, like this rabbit. Play out the rabbit, draw a card. Sean has an answer for it, draw another card. Sort of making it so that Zach isn't losing tempo in that way.
Goat
off the top is huge.
Yeah, I don't see a bounce card hand. Of course, doesn't have enough resources for that, but it's just gonna be enough here for Zach.
Maleficent Dragon off the top. Can sing how far I'll go with Maui as well.
Mm-hmm. The Visions of the Future be the card that goes to hand.
We only need one of these characters to survive the turn. We can play the goat. Then Sean basically needs a pirate's life or it's game. Zach within grasp of this world's invite here. Sean still has ways out though. Is going to decide to ice block the Lawrence, challenge it with the Sisu. Maleficent Dragon comes down, banishing this rabbit. Zach will draw a card off of that when it's banished.
Zach has got to be feeling good here.
Zach full grip of cards as well. Only 4 ink in the inkwell, but
Ruby Sapphire only has so many cards in the deck that can keep answering this.
as long as Zach keeps the tempo on, he saw Sean inking that Hiram, knows that Sean is low on cards in hand, has just kept that tempo on all game.
Zach definitely wanted to find a 1-drop there. Sean knows the scenarios that he's in.
Zach thinking very hard about what cards he wants to play, what the outs for Sean might be,
Looking
which
for
cards he can ink if he wants to ink.
Looking for a 5-ink play with something like a Lawrence plus a Smee here. Or sorry, Pete plus
Potentially
a Smee.
Pete, yeah.
Pete plus a Smee. I think that's going to be the play. Zach's got to know he's attrition Sean out of like all of his answers here. Got goat in hand. Keep inking as well. You can potentially get to 6 ink, which is going to be that goat plus that bounce. Touching that goat, and it's going to win you on the following turns. I mean, Zach is playing this slow because there's no reason to play it fast, but this is getting close to a lock here for our Amethyst Steel player. There it is, Pete plus me.
This is going to be so tough for Sean to get out of. Both characters out of range of something like Sisu. Empowered Sibling can't play a card like Be Prepared because of the Pete or Brawl.
Does have double ice block, so that is going to make
you're correct.
Sisu an answer here, but has... Oh, and now we have